Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your Tuesday to join us for our October webinar here at THBD. Today, we're going to learn 5 productivity hacks to launch new products from our featured speakers. We have Spencer Parikh, founder and CEO of Entrapoint, and Rebecca Knuth, founder and CEO of Splurge. Their presentation will address how to be an effective business leader and entrepreneur today, you must be well versed in all functions. This includes everything from cloud-based tech stack to options on go-to-market to data-driven customer experiences. In addition, you must know how to clearly communicate with investors, legal, customers, vendors, media, and technical teams. Wearing all these hats can be kind of overwhelming, so Spencer and Rebecca have put together a presentation on the reality of starting a new business and some helpful tips in doing so. Before I hand it over to you guys, I just want to remind everyone that if you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to submit them anytime and under the questions tab on your control panel, or if you're here in person, we'll address all questions at the very end, so just raise your hand. And then also we will be sending out a copy of their presentation at the very end, so it will include their contact information, so if you have any additional questions, you'll have a copy of that. With that being said, thank you so much, Spencer and Rebecca, for joining us today, and feel free to take it away.
Great, thank you, Kelsey. We really appreciate it, and thank you for that warm introduction. And Tammy, also wanted to thank you and Temple Health Biosciences. So really appreciate the opportunity to share some of this research and these productivity hacks. And to set a little context, this is pretty much focused on the entrepreneur and the challenges that they face and some opportunities to improve productivity. And we're coming in at that perspective. And you can be more productive as an entrepreneur and a business owner. There's opportunities to use remote teams, gig-based platforms, and today we're going to share a few ideas to how to manage that more effectively and kind of use a program management approach. It's definitely the lighter side of entrepreneurship. It's definitely a little more of the fun and mechanical part of entrepreneurship. Before we get into the details and some more of the context, my name is Spencer Parikh, and I'm CEO and founder of Entrapoint. I started the company back in 2014 and decided to use a very lean approach to validate and understand the challenges that entrepreneurs face. Having been a part of several high growth startups, I've definitely burned the candle at both ends and been through the tribulations and trials of all of those things, and said, if there's an opportunity to help entrepreneurs, then would love to find a way. So we set out and interviewed a couple hundred entrepreneurs and validated some of the challenges. And one of the challenges that we found was that despite the abundance of tools, methodologies, resources, incubators, it's even more challenging today to launch a business because you've got different routes to market, you've got different social media channels, you've got different opportunities for investment that pretty much didn't exist 15, 20 years ago. So based on that, we said, what if there is a program management mindset or a program management approach that we can apply to launching a business? And so we created our pre-accelerator based off of that. Through all that research, what we love to do is share that data and share those insights with the community. And today is just a sliver of some of those insights. And again, it's just more the lighter side of starting up. And here's Rebecca. Rebecca is the CEO and founder of Splurge. And Rebecca, if you could just share a little bit about your background and what Splurge is all about, that'd be wonderful.
Absolutely. Good afternoon. I am Rebecca, CEO and founder of Splurge. And just to give you a little bit of context as to why I'm here this afternoon, side by side with Spencer, I came from actually an executive background in the automotive industry. I've got over 15 years of experience heading up a design agency focused in the automotives, and my company was fortunate enough to make it through the economic whirlwind of 2008.
Hey, Rebecca.
Yes?
So sorry to interrupt you. I don't know, you're just a little bit echoey. I don't know if you're further away or something.
We can't understand you at all. So you have to start over, and wherever you are, go to where Spencer is, because we can't understand.
Okay, sounds good. I will maybe move into the magical chair. Is that any better for you?
That's a little
Definitely,
better, yeah.
it must be magic.
Okay, so I was just saying that I came from an executive background in the automotive industry. I ran and still do currently run a design agency based in the automotive industry. I've been doing that for nearly 15 years now, and my company was fortunate enough to survive the economic whirlwind of 2008, 2009. But this is a business that I can somewhat manage in my sleep, not to sound overly confident, but I don't need to put a lot of time and effort into sustaining that business. So I had a creative idea for this app that is now called Splurge. And I thought, well, if I can nail the automotive industry, I can nail the technical industry. Turns out that's not the case. So Spencer's brought me in today because I've had Splurge now for about 2 years live on the app and on the iOS and Android store. And I, as a non-technical founder, had no idea what I was getting into. So while Spencer is going to chat a bit today on more of a, not a global, but an overall level of ways to increase productivity when launching a new product or service, I will be here to share my nitty-gritty stories about how I wish I had known what Spencer is about to share, so as to hopefully save all of you some time and, more importantly, money in your quest to launch something new as an entrepreneur. So Spencer, take it away.
Perfect, perfect. Thanks, Rebecca. So one of the things that we found was that, just clicking here, trying to change the slide. Hang on 1 second. There we go. You know, launching really is the definition of a complex problem. And why this is important is that, you know, when you look at starting a business, and you're all probably immersed in this at one stage or another in your early stages, you know, from personal experience, I mean, it's about burning the candle at both ends. I mean, you're working full-time at a job, and you're also launching your business, or you're 100% focused on the business, and, you know, there's some shortcomings in terms of finances. You know, some of the challenges that you've got to face in terms of explaining your idea to family members, to your spouse, and sustaining that enthusiasm, you know, month after month. And, you know, to Rebecca's point, you know, coming from the automotive industry and now into, you know, an app that focuses primarily on consumers, there is this conflict that we found that, you know, if there's awareness around this conflict, then it kind of makes you a little bit better, you know, there's a better mindset around, you know, the entrepreneurial journey. That conflict is that, you know, if you come from a corporate environment and you've spent maybe 10, 15 years working that job, you've learned those operating structures, you've learned what works and what doesn't. You've got dependencies and you've got hierarchies that help you be productive and efficient. As soon as you start on your own, you've got to build all that stuff. So, you know, that is one of the most interesting points of, you know, the complexity around starting a business. And then, you know, you've got design thinking, you've got integrative thinking, and you've got this problem that pretty much changes as time goes on. And sometimes it can become more complex, and sometimes it becomes a little less complex, depending on how you apply, you know, these productivity elements. So, you know, the other part that we learned is that entrepreneurs typically get a lot of outdated advice. I mean, the advice that you need has got to be absolutely relevant to the problem you're solving, and sometimes finding those solutions are really hard. So what we're going to do is share a few ideas in terms of making some of these ideas and feedback a little bit more relevant to the problem you're trying to solve, and ensure that hopefully you don't get hung up on one step. And, you know, your market validation is a little more lean and agile, and you can test out different concepts. So, and the other part is that this is really what makes it more complex. And this is just, again, to set some context. I mean, the decisions you've got to make, I mean, they're immense. The jobs you've got to do as CEO and founder, you've got all these different roles and different hats you've got to wear. And I'm sure this is relating with all the entrepreneurs out there. The deliverables you've got to create. the creative briefs and the projected financials, the investor presentations, all of those things. So if there's a few ways to make these things a little bit more streamlined and easier to accomplish, that'd be a wonderful thing. And those are the few ideas we're going to share with you. We also found that the tools you've got to learn in the early stages, there's actually 34 different applications at minimum that an entrepreneur needs to onboard and use. And if you look at these apps, it can be anything from just managing email to a product management platform and everything in between. Managing landing pages or using tools to do your validation and customer discovery. Typically, these are very new tools for a lot of entrepreneurs. And if you take those 34 applications and you say, look, I need to learn about 3 to 5 features on there, you can see very quickly that there's just a ton of things that you got to learn in the early stages to make yourself a successful entrepreneur. So without further ado, let's get into the first hack. One of the things that really helps in terms of driving clarity in terms of your priorities and how to really kind of figure out some of the next steps in terms of market validation and messaging is being able to list out all your market segments. If you can list out all the areas and all the segments that you could potentially sell your solution to, and also figure out what stage are you exactly at. Are you in problem exploration? Do you know the #1 customer, the #1 problem you're solving for? Have you already signed up customers and you're now trying to prioritize your feature set? Clearly identifying what stage you're at, and many of you may have already done this, so this may be a little bit more of a refresher. But we do this with a lot of clients. We'll start with just listing out the total market that they could go after, and then we prioritize which 1 or 2 segments we could actually validate. And then sourcing and scheduling the interviews and doing those interviews, maybe asking 5 to 10 questions to validate the hypothesis. And then, processing those insights and reporting on those insights will help you pick 1 to 2 or 3 segments to focus on. The challenge that we end up seeing is that the segments that people want to go after, that entrepreneurs want to go after, end up being typically really broad. And the research industry has a lot to do with that because, some of the filters, for example, it might be gender, it might be age group, it might be geo, it's not specific enough. It doesn't get granular enough in terms of the actual segment that you may want to go after. And so when you end up building these hypotheses, you can validate and test. So this all comes from lean methodologies, and it's just super effective in terms of prioritizing immediate needs. Okay. Another hack is that if it's possible, just step back and take an afternoon, list out all the things that you need to accomplish, and see if you can build a 90-day program. And try to break it down into 10 projects and maybe a few milestones each. And then on your calendar, just set a reminder that every month you're going to revisit the plan. Oftentimes, what we're seeing is that there's just obviously, people have a natural tendency gravitating towards the things that they're very comfortable doing. And so they get locked into those tracks. And then some of the things that are important for advancing the business may get ignored. Breaking it down into an actual program helps you delegate, it helps you stay accountable, and it helps the people around you that are going to support you be more clear as far as your ask and what you're trying to accomplish. So for example, a project goal could be, hey, I want to do 50 customer interviews in the next month. Great, now break down all the things that'll help you get there, and then take it to somebody who's done it before and say, look, are these the right steps to accomplish that? Product mock-ups, for example, customer-facing wireframes for feedback in, let's say, 2 months. Sales super critical. Can you get pre-orders or signups, and maybe you can get a first pre-order or a sale in the next 3 months. But these are very specific, measurable, and basically SMART goals that you can stay accountable to. So this is a wonderful hack that's been working really, really well with a lot of entrepreneurs who've got a ton of things to juggle and manage. Rebecca, would there be anything that you'd like to add to this so far?
I would. I think hack number 1 and hack number 2 go hand in hand seamlessly. Priorities versus sequence was something we were very unaware of when I started Splurge. A gentleman named Joe brought that concept to our attention. He's no longer with us. He's not dead, but he's just no longer with us at Splurge. But priorities, if you look at your priorities almost as perhaps your mission statement or the culture that you want to create within your company, those are your priorities, how you want your customers to feel, how you want your staff to feel, what your objective is at the end of the day. Are you setting out just to make money, or are you setting out to make difference and the money is a second priority, versus your sequence, which is the order in which you're going to accomplish everything. I made this terrible mistake early on at Splurge of falling victim to the glossy magazines and spending a ton of money on advertising and beautiful pictures and layouts and advertisements and whatnot, because they were pretty and I was a sucker for anything shiny. But my app wasn't at a point where I should have been spending any money really on advertising, because Splurge at its essence is an e-commerce based app. It is a city-centric, best of the best, if you will. So let's just say you go to Amazon and type in coffee, you're going to get 25,000 coffees from all over the world. If you go to Splurge, you'll type in coffee and get the best 20 coffees in San Diego, or the best 20 coffees in Boston or Atlanta or Miami. It's very market driven. So, or Temple, exactly, best 20 coffees in Temple. So the sequencing in which I did that particular example of advertising before the app was full of the products would be the equivalent to advertising that my mall is open, but there were no actual products in the mall for people to purchase. So I would have liked to have known that hack earlier on. And then to roadmap everything, you just want to make sure that you're always heading in the right direction on time. And had I known better how to roadmap and explain things to my app developers, I probably would have saved a lot of time and money and having to redevelop things because I did them out of sequence.
Yeah, and one of the other things that we're finding is, as a founder, with having this high-level program plan, some of the sub-projects become a little more clearer to articulate. And to Rebecca's point, had you known that a product requirements document, right, with all of those details needed to be filled out to have a proper discussion with development, then things may have gone a little bit smoother. So some of these plans start driving a better understanding of what the best practices are for each one of these functions, and it becomes a lot clearer for everybody around you how to specifically help you. And start to communicate in the language that they actually understand. So hopefully this helps a little bit. This is a good segue into Rebecca's experience in terms of the third hack, excuse me, in terms of hiring remote teams. So maybe Rebecca, you could talk about some of your experiences and some of the cycles in terms of hiring remote teams and how that helped you advance and become more productive.
I am what I like to call a self-proclaimed expert at hiring remote teams, because as a CEO, I've always said a good CEO doesn't have all the answers, they just know all the questions to ask, the right questions. And as I mentioned, I am a non-technical founder, meaning I have no technical experience, especially in the app development world. So I knew straight away what I didn't know, and that was quite a lot. I knew I was going to need a graphic designer. I knew I was going to need a website team. I knew I was going to need a social media guru and an app developer. And chances are I was not going to find them all where I was located geographically, which is San Diego. So I knew I was going to have to hire remotely. I fell foul of hiring remote teams in other time zones, not because of anything other than the fact that when hiring, and this is my personal opinion, but I feel very strongly about it, when you hire anyone on another time zone in this beginning phase of your business or at a new product launch phase of your business, it is very, very critical to have those people be willing to work on as much of the same time zone as you are on. For example, one of our first app developers were a company based out of London, and their 9 to 5 and my 9 to 5 coexisted only about an hour or two per day, and they were completely unwilling to modify that. They were completely unwilling to come in early or to stay late. Therefore, we really only had an hour or two at max of working on the same thing at the same time. As you can understand, all the back and forth voicemails, back and forth emails, et cetera, was very time consuming, very expensive, and really slowed down productivity. So if you have to hire remotely or choose to hire remotely, whether because they're better skilled at the task or because of budgetary concerns, really do try and find a company or a person that will work with you on your same time zone.
Excellent. Thanks, Rebecca. So the next couple of hacks and the last two are around using gig-based websites and also around more of the program management mindset and not really micromanaging. So one of the things that we found, and we actually set up our entrepreneurs with, are accounts with gig-based websites. And the one biggest thing that is super helpful using these websites is that it helps the entrepreneur be more accountable. When you don't have a team, when you've got limited resources, and you're forced to actually scope something that you specifically need, these gig-based websites help you do that. So you've got to be very specific in your ask. And then you'll get feedback, you'll get response, you'll get actual projects completed or ideas, and then you've got to respond back to the people that are actually doing this work. So for example, Fiverr, if you want to get a logo set done for 5 or 10 bucks, sometimes maybe 15, 20 bucks, very inexpensively, you can get 3 or 4 logo designs. And then you could source this out once you've scoped it to maybe 3 or 4 people that can design your logos. So for less than 100 bucks, you'll get a wide range of logos, and now you can provide the feedback and continue the iterations on the design. We'll use Fiverr also for competitive analysis, which is wonderful. So if you've got maybe 4 or 5 companies that you want to compare your company to, there's research folks out there that'll scour the internet, look at your competitors' websites and compile reports on that. And then you can just update that, every couple of months, for a few bucks. So it's super simple, to use these sites. When I looked at Fiverr's revenue, I think they're somewhere around 40 or 50 million bucks in revenue. So, when you look at the total volume of work and the things that need to get done, very few people are using these sites to accomplish it, but that can give you a tremendous advantage to get a lot of work done at the same time when you have limited resources. Another perspective was that in previous lives, I used these sites and paid for it out of my personal expenses. It just made me more valuable on the team in companies that I've worked with before. I never really expensed it, and I just got more insights that would have taken a long time to get approvals on to use, external resources. Of course, you're not really revealing any kind of company secrets or anything like that, so there's no issues. You're just trying to get some, publicly available perspectives and information to help you be more productive. So, and there's lots of gig-based websites out there, but I check out Fiverr. There's another one called Upwork that's doing really well in terms of providing everything from developers to design people to research people to social media managers. 99 Designs, you might have heard that, to get graphic work done or landing pages, and they can do design and development. So Yeah, so here's a few examples of gig-based websites. The other and final hack that has been really just a valuable thing is in terms of improving productivity, really involves just shifting your mindset. So typically, and I gave this presentation at Startup Week San Diego, and a whole 60 minutes on it, is that the shift in the mindset for an entrepreneur to think more like a program manager is invaluable. When they start breaking down all the things they've got to do and taking the time to just make this part of their process, breaking it down into milestones, breaking it down into subtasks, putting deadlines on things, and then either you could even use one of these gig-based platforms to hire a very inexpensive accountability coach. So these people can send you reminders, and that makes you accountable to hitting these milestones and projects. But when you start thinking like a program manager, and I looked at examples of Elon Musk, I looked at examples of Richard Branson, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and several other leaders, even outside of tech. One common thread was that they're really thinking like a program manager, trying to manage a lot of complex things, but they're breaking it down into small tasks, and they made their meetings with their teams and vendors extremely succinct. They wouldn't have these hour-long meetings. They would make them 5-10 minute meetings that were solving a very specific question or problem, so they could advance things very quickly. And by the way, that took a long time for them to figure out. It wasn't like they just learned that day one, but it helped drive efficiency and productivity. And being a program manager, one of the key traits is that it really helps you kind of bring these teams together and really drive the bigger picture by tackling all the details, driving that bigger picture. And so, so that's hack number 5. At this point, we would turn it over to you guys to see if there's any questions or thoughts. And we're going to put up our contact information. Again, we're happy to share any of our experiences, any of the research that we've been doing over the past few years, any other additional perspectives. And if you want to brainstorm any ideas, we're happy to do that with you also. So Kelsey, back to you. See if there's any questions out there.
Yeah, I think we've got a couple questions over here on our end, so I'm gonna let them take it away.
Okay. Yeah, I have a question about how do you know when to, I guess, transition from like validation into sales? So I guess currently my company, we're at the point where we're collecting data on our product to validate it. Should we wait until all of our validation is completely done, or should we start doing I guess like pre-sales and stuff like that? What's your opinion on how to transition?
Yeah, good question. So a really good question. What we encourage and try to build is the shortest timeline to try to sell as possible. Okay, because nothing beats validation or nothing confirms validation faster than actual pre-orders and sales. Now, sales could mean many things. It could mean a letter of intent. It could mean, of course, a pre-order. It could be a signed contract or an order. It could be even, email registrations in volume, right? A bunch of email registrations saying that they want to sign up for your beta, or whatever later stages that they can start playing with the product or service. So we encourage getting sales going as quickly as possible and defining what you're exactly selling to advance the agenda. The other byproduct to that is that it forces you to be very specific. It forces you to really think through it could be a pitch deck, it could be a sales deck, it could be your messaging for networking, your presentation skills. It drives accountability over you being a business leader versus an entrepreneur. So, you know, encourage sales as early as possible, but the actual plan and the program to do that obviously would be very specific to what you're trying to accomplish. And, you know, we're happy to discuss ideas around that and just brainstorm around that.
Thanks.
Sure.
Rebecca, I have a question for you. You talked about hiring remote teams and that a good CEO knows the right questions. Okay, so I, as a CEO, have a question. I know what I don't know, but how do I go about finding the people that are going to answer the questions for me and to know whether or not I want to add them to my team?
Great question. When I realized that I knew less than I did know, if that makes sense as a double negative, I started chatting with people that were already in the industry. So I chatted with some fellow CEOs or high ups in other technical fields. And I gave them the cocktail napkin version of what Splurge was and what I wanted to accomplish. And they said, okay, well, you're going to need this person, and this person. So then I just did a little research on what those skill sets included, and I set out to find those people. Now, one of the things I should have done better was that old saying, hire slow and fire fast. So I should have spent a bit more time on interviewing app developers, for example. I'm on my 4th app development team, which might sound impressive, but it shouldn't. It should sound like I went through 3 before I found the right one. And that's because I didn't hire slowly enough. I was either the first time I went for the least expensive option, and that didn't pan out. Another time I went for a startup to help me with my startup. And as we all know, unfortunately, the success rate of a lot of startups is not that high. So that company went under. So then I was left holding the baby again. So once you find out what skill sets it is that you're missing, and therefore which people you need to bring onto your team, do a lot of research as to what makes a good app developer or a bad app developer. And that's just an example. Say you need a secretary, find out what it is that makes a great secretary versus a not good secretary. And then take your time in the interview process, because the interview process is much less expensive than the rehiring and firing process of a new person. So I hope that addresses your
That's
question.
great advice. Thank you.
Yeah, if I can add one thing also, you know, give companies or teams that you'd like to hire, give them very small projects to test. You know, craft out just work the same process as you would, assuming that, you know, they're best practices or best methods. Practice on really small projects. And see how the working relationship forms, you know, see the quality of the work, and then you can make some decisions based off of that. You know, and using gig-based platforms is a wonderful way to do that. I mean, you know, there's resources out there that can help you actually craft the scope of that small project. And so, look, I need to learn best practices for hiring a development team. What do I need to look at? Boom, you know, then they build a plan for you, and then you take that out and try to test out a small project. Of course, time permitting, right? So that's another idea that's worked really well.
Great. Anybody else?
Perfect. Does anyone else have questions? No? All right, I think you got them all. I'm sure there will be some questions as they let all this information marinate,
Sure.
but thank you guys so much. And like I mentioned before, we'll be sending around the PDF of their presentation so you can refer back to it later. But yeah, if that's
very good. Thank you guys. We had a blast doing this. Really appreciate your time.